How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Finally, we're not doing a reaction video to a TMZ video. Now we're actually pushing forward to something we've been waiting to hear. And maybe this is why TMZ's been putting a lot of stuff out lately. Because right now, they want transparency, but something we just found out today is the reason why they're not getting it. Behind closed doors, grand jury push in the Celeste Rivas case. So I want to go ahead and give you some information on this. So the investigation into 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez's death has entered a critical new phase, one that operates almost entirely in shadow. According to law enforcement sources, the Los Angeles County grand jury has been hearing evidence related to the discovery of Celeste's remains in the trunk of singer d4vd's Tesla, with prosecutors from the district attorney's office presenting their case during recent sessions. This development represents a seismic shift in how prosecutors are pursuing this case, and it's raising important questions about transparency, public access to information, and what happens when the criminal justice system pulls its curtains closed. Now, to be honest with you, I'm 100% okay with this. And maybe this is why it's become a bit hectic, because there's people wanting to know what's being said in those sessions. So what is a grand jury and why does it matter here? So again, we're all learning at the same time. So I wanted to look this up to see what this all means. And eventually I will get better guests as the channel grows. But in the meantime, I have to do my own due diligence. So before we dive into the specifics of the d4vd case, let's break down what a grand jury actually is. Because if you're not familiar with the criminal justice system, this process can feel deliberately opaque, and in many ways it is. So in California, a grand jury is a legal process used in federal and serious state felony cases where a jury of citizens from the community convenes to determine whether there is sufficient evidence to charge or indict an individual for a criminal offense. Think of it as a gatekeeping mechanism, a screening process that stands between an investigation and formal criminal charges. So this makes sense. This is where we should be at. So guys, all this stuff that's happening behind closed doors, people think LAPD wasn't doing anything, and they were. Here's the crucial distinction. Whereas a petite jury, the kind you see on TV during trials, decides whether someone is guilty or innocent, the grand jury's job is simply to determine whether there is probable cause to believe that a person may have committed a crime. They're not weighing guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. They're asking a much simpler question. Is there enough evidence here to move forward with criminal charges? In Los Angeles County, because the population exceeds 4 million, grand juries consist of 23 members, and an indictment requires at least 12 jurors to vote in favor. These aren't legal experts. They're ordinary citizens randomly selected from the same pool used for regular jury duty. Their term can last months or even a year, during which they may hear multiple cases. So it's the one-sided courtroom. Here's where things get uncomfortable for anyone who values the adversarial nature of American justice. The defendant has neither the right to present evidence to the grand jury nor to cross-examine witnesses, with only the prosecutor permitted to present evidence and the defendant having no right to counsel, even if required to testify. So this is why I think everything's going out there in TMZ. They're trying to cause confusion, trying to, attack the system, when in the end, they're moving forward and they're doing what needs to be done to protect the integrity of the case. And again, if there's a chance that the medical examiner comes back and the death of Celeste Rivas Hernandez is undetermined, now it's becomes circumstantial. And I think that's what this is about. If we can't get the death finding, like what was the manner of death or what was the actual cause of death, then we're going to look to circumstantial evidence. And this is where I think the defense will be very curious. They're going to want to know what the prosecutor or what the prosecution has. And again, it makes sense because let's present it. Let's see what we got. And then when it's ready to be handed over to the defense, it will. And then they can go ahead and do what they got to do. So I'm going to read that again. The defense doesn't get a seat at the table. There's no lawyer arguing the other side, no cross-examination of witnesses, no presentation of exculpatory evidence. It's just the prosecution, their witnesses, and the grand jurors. The only non-jurors who may attend grand jury proceedings are the district attorney or attorney general staff presenting the case, a court reporter who makes a record of the proceedings, the witnesses who are subpoenaed, and an interpreter if necessary. After hearing the evidence and receiving instruction on the law, the grand jury deliberates alone, no prosecutors, no judge, no one else present. This is why there's an old legal saying that a prosecutor could indict a ham sandwich if they wanted to. Indictment rates are extremely high in grand jury proceedings across the country, raising questions about the value of this review when grand jurors aren't able to adequately evaluate evidence presented only by the district attorney. But here's the flip side, in case someone had to argue. That's why I'm more for the flip side right here. An indictment is an accusatory pleading and not a finding of guilt. And it's based on standards of proof consisting of strong suspicion or probable cause as opposed to proof beyond reasonable doubt, which is required for conviction at trial. It's supposed to be a low bar. The real fight comes later. It's just basically, do we have enough evidence to go forward? And sometimes it makes sense. I don't want to go ahead and show the defense everything we have because they could find a way to circumvent that. So let's just see if there's something worth presenting. And then once they determine it's worth presenting, then again, now the defense will know what we have, and then they can determine if we decide to go to trial, if you're guilty or innocent then. But this isn't about being guilty or innocent. It's about seeing if we have enough to push forward. So why use a grand jury instead of a preliminary hearing? In California, prosecutors have options. They can seek a grand jury indictment, or they can proceed through a preliminary hearing, which is a more public process where a judge determines if there's probable cause. So in practice, district attorneys generally prefer to use the speedier preliminary hearing process. So when prosecutors choose the grand jury route, it tells us something about the case. District attorneys are more likely to use the grand jury indictment process if the case involves witnesses who are children or vulnerable, if the evidence is complex, if the case is high profile, or if the prosecutor wants the secrecy and subpoena power that the grand jury processes provide. So that makes sense. I mean, is there a chance we're going to have some witnesses underage? Yes, because she was underage. Plus, I don't know, I'm sure maybe d4vd had a lot of people that were minors around him, but the Discord. So it's probably a few people that are underage that they have to maybe use as witnesses. The evidence is complex. I mean, is it? I mean, we don't know, but I'm sure as hell when we've been doing this, it became more complex because everybody put their own subjective narrative to everything that was found. Case is definitely high profile, and I believe secrecy does protect the integrity of the investigation. So in the Celeste Rivas case, you can see how these factors might apply. This is a case involving a 14-year-old victim. There may be minor witnesses. The evidence may be complex, involving forensic analysis of remains that were severely decomposed. And there is intense public interest in a case involving a rising music star. And then there's the secrecy problem and TMZ's push for transparency. Here's where the tension between investigation and transparency becomes acute. A detective categorized the case as an investigation into murder in a court filing requesting that the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's findings be sealed. The judge granted this request, and now the medical examiner's office is barred from releasing any information about Celeste's death, not even basic details like cause or manner of death, because they did say it's an investigation into a murder case. The hold means that no records or details associated with the case, including the cause and manner of death and the medical examiner report, can be released until the hold is lifted. And the medical examiner is not happy about it. Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Odi Ukpo questioned the wisdom of sealing his department's findings, stating that the practice of security holds is virtually unheard of in other counties. He emphasized that his department is dedicated to serving the community with transparency. That goes against a little bit of what I said in my other show. I didn't know there was this much of a conflict, but either way, if they're told what to do, they're going to do it. I mean, that they have to. This is where TMZ enters the picture. The outlet has been aggressively covering this case, publishing details that law enforcement disputes, including claims that Celeste's body was partially frozen and decapitated. LAPD Captain Scott Williams refuted these claims, stating that they're not true. TMZ, however, stood by its reporting with the source connected to the medical examiner, insisting that Celeste's body was partially frozen when discovered. LAPD explained that they sought to seal the medical examiner's records to protect the integrity of the investigation, not to undermine transparency. And that's what I did say in the last show. I mentioned it, guys. Everything that TMZ said in that last video they did, I mean, it's all fluff. At the end, it's right here. They're trying to protect the integrity of the investigation, try to cause doubt in the lead investigation. That's what TMZ is trying to do. This creates a fascinating dynamic. TMZ is advocating for public access to information that law enforcement wants sealed. Meanwhile, the medical examiner, a government agency, is pushing back against law enforcement secrecy. I think also TMZ is pushing it because, one, they want to control the narrative. Two, is they want to give as much information to the other side. But that's an assumption. But I think it's well grounded in the context we've seen so far with them. So now you got to connect the grand jury to the transparency battle. So here's how these pieces fit together. The grand jury's process is already secret by design, but now prosecutors have added another layer of secrecy by sealing the medical examiner's findings. See, now the picture's starting to get clearer. Got to ask the right questions to get the right answers. So that's why, you know what, if we got the grand jury happening, then let's go ahead and seal the findings from the medical examiner. Maybe that's why the court the second time said, yeah, might as well. We got a grand jury going. Let's keep things protective. Let's go ahead and seal it so the whole process now is protected. Think about what this means practically. The grand jury is hearing evidence behind closed doors. The jurors are being presented with evidence by prosecutors and only prosecutors. The medical examiner's findings, which would normally be public record, have been sealed by court order. The public, the media, and any potential defense attorney have no access to what's being presented. This double layer of secrecy gives prosecutors enormous control over the narrative. And here's an important legal consequence. If prosecutors secure an indictment through the grand jury, they can skip the preliminary hearing entirely, and they can eliminate the defense, eliminating the defense's one opportunity to challenge the evidence in open court before trial. So it's all starting to make sense. It's all starting to make sense. So again, LAPD pushed for that security hold on September 15th. They didn't get it, but on the second time around, they got it, and this is probably why. We got the grand jury. So if we're going to do everything in secrecy, that final result matters, and we need to keep that in secret as well. And I think that was a smart move by the judge. And the funny thing is, TMZ should be presenting that. Maybe that's why they're asking the medical examiner to seal it for now. But that wasn't presented anything that they said earlier today. So what we know about evidence, while we can't see inside the grand jury room, we do know some basics about what prosecutors are likely presenting. Celeste Rivas Hernandez remains were discovered in the trunk of d4vd's Tesla at a Hollywood tow yard on September 8th. According to LAPD, she was not decapitated or frozen, contrary to TMZ's reporting. No official public sources has confirmed dismemberment. Celeste had run away from her Lake Elsinore home multiple times in 2024, and her family reported her missing at least 3 times, with their last known contact being a phone call home at the end of May 2024. Investigators have evidence that d4vd traveled to Santa Barbara area sometime during the spring of 2025, though the reason for the trip is still under investigation and no conclusions have been drawn. Celeste's mother previously told TMZ that her daughter had been dating someone named David before she disappeared. d4vd's music videos include violent imagery, such as scenes depicting bodies, wounds, or trunk imagery that have drawn additional scrutiny. These are public artistic materials and not evidence of wrongdoing, but prosecutors may reference them to establish background or context. LAPD Captain Hamilton, is that it? State that investigators are going to get justice for Celeste Rivas, noting that no one is off the table. Some media sources have reported that investigators believe others may have been involved in helping dispose of the body, but LAPD has not publicly confirmed this. Now, here's the defense attorney's dilemma. Imagine you're d4vd's defense attorney right now. A grand jury's meeting, hearing evidence about your client. You have no idea what the evidence is. You can't present counter arguments. You can't cross-examine witnesses. You can't even see the medical examiner's report to understand the forensic findings. I love it. And people say LAPD is not doing nothing. I mean, hopefully this gives us a better perspective. Hamilton stated that the investigators have not sought d4vd's cooperation, so there's no ongoing dialogue where defense counsel might glean information about the prosecution theory. So that's smart too. Listen to that again. Hamilton stated that investigators have not sought d4vd's cooperation, so there's no ongoing dialogue where defense counsel might glean information about the prosecution's theory. And again, I mentioned sort of that in the other show I just did. It's maybe they had all the information right from day one that they needed. So they're going to the public for help. The transparency is really not needed. They have all that they needed. So legally, d4vd is considered a suspect by investigators, but he has not been arrested because officers do not yet have probable cause for arrest. That could change the moment the grand jury returns an indictment. Guys, this is what we're waiting for. That's why it's taking a bit for the arrest, and it's clear as day. The media has twisted this and bastardized it, but there is work behind the scenes. So what happens next? One source said the grand jury has been in session in recent weeks, but it was unclear whether prosecutors had completed their presentation. The grand jury could return an indictment at any time or decline to indict, though that outcome is statistically rare. Again, if you're bringing it to a grand jury, you got information, you got evidence. If an indictment is returned, it would formally charge someone like d4vd, possibly others, with crimes related to Celeste's death. The case would then move to arraignment and eventually to trial, where the sealed medical examiner's records would have to be made available to the defense. If the grand jury declines to indict, what's called a no true bill. Prosecutors would have to decide whether to present the case again or proceed through a public preliminary hearing. And then again, that would be more open, more challenging. The bigger picture, justice versus transparency. The Celeste Rivas case forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about how we balance effective criminal investigations with democratic principles of transparency and accountability. On one hand, secrecy protects investigations and witnesses. On the other hand, excessive secrecy risks undermining public trust and limiting oversight. TMZ's role is unusual but significant. They are pressing for information that government agencies want to keep sealed. Meanwhile, the medical examiner himself is openly questioning whether this level of secrecy serves the public's interest. The tension will shape how the public perceives this case as it moves forward. I just think TMZ has a motive. A 14-year-old girl, at the end of the day, all stands in center. So amid all these procedural battles, it's important to remember the human reality. Celeste Rivas Hernandez was a 14-year-old girl whose body was found months after she disappeared. Her family deserves answers, the public deserves the truth, and the justice system must ultimately present its evidence in open court. The grand jury is not the end, it's the beginning of the next phase, a phase that will determine whether prosecutors believe they can prove before a jury what happened to Celeste and who is responsible. I think that will provide some clarity, at least enough for a discussion in my chat or in my comments here, but that's the key. I put it up, we all learn together, and then from there, we build the dialogue we need to further our knowledge on the system and what should happen next. As always, guys, if you like the content, please, I do have Buy Me a Cup of Coffee. It's in the description as well as on top of the YouTube channel, and please stay safe.